Mr. Albert, a 65-year-old wealthy businessman, had always lived a life of solitude. Despite his vast fortune and towering mansion in Lagos, there was an emptiness that wealth couldn't fill. He had buried himself in his work, distancing himself from the world outside, until one fateful day when a chance encounter changed everything. While driving through the bustling streets of Lagos, Mr. Albert spotted a small fruit stand on the corner of a busy intersection. The stand, though modest, caught his attention not because of the fresh fruits but because of the young woman behind it. She was beautiful, with a radiant smile that seemed out of place amidst the chaos of the city. Her name was Ememe, a 20-year-old orphan who lived with her aunt, a stern woman who treated Ememe with little affection. Ememe's life was far from easy. Orphaned at a young age, she had been taken in by her aunt, who saw her more as a burden than as family. The fruit stand was Ememe's only escape, a small corner of the world where she could find solace in her work and the occasional kindness of strangers. Mr. Albert, intrigued by the young woman, began visiting her fruit stand daily. At first, he simply observed her from afar, buying fruits under the guise of needing them for his household. But as the days passed, he found himself drawn to her more and more. There was a gentleness in Ememe that he hadn't seen in years, a warmth that tugged at his lonely heart. Ememe noticed the older man's visits, and though she was cautious, she couldn't deny the kindness in his eyes. Unlike most customers, Mr. Albert treated her with respect, never haggling over prices and always taking a moment to exchange pleasantries. Over time, those brief interactions became the highlight of her day. Eventually, Mr. Albert gathered the courage to ask Ememe out for dinner. Ememe was hesitant, unsure of the intentions of a man so much older than her, but something in his gentle demeanor made her agree. That evening, they dined at a fancy restaurant, a place far removed from Ememe's usual surroundings. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and heard. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams, and a bond began to form between them. As their relationship deepened, so did the whispers around them. Friends and neighbors warned Ememe about the dangers of getting involved with an older, wealthy man. He only wants a young trophy wife, they said. He'll discard you when he's bored. But Ememe, who had seen enough of life's hardships, believed in the sincerity of Mr. Albert's affection. Meanwhile, Mr. Albert's son, Caris, returned from abroad, bringing with him a storm of disapproval. Furious about his father's relationship with Ememe, Caris accused her of being a gold digger, someone who would tarnish the family's reputation. "She's only after your money, father," Caris insisted, his anger boiling over. But Mr. Albert was resolute. "I love her, Caris," he said firmly. "And nothing you say will change that." Determined to protect his father, Caris took matters into his own hands. He hired a private investigator to dig into Ememe's past, hoping to find something that would discredit her. At the same time, he tried to manipulate Ememe's aunt, fueling her greed in hopes of driving a wedge between Ememe and Mr. Albert. As the investigation unfolded, the private investigator uncovered a shocking secret that had been buried for years. Ememe was the daughter of Mr. Albert's late business partner, a man who had died under mysterious circumstances. This connection was purely coincidental, but it meant that Ememe had a deeper tie to Mr. Albert's life than either of them had realized. Ememe was stunned by the news. She had known nothing of her father's business ties, having been too young when he died to understand his world. The revelation shook her to her core, leaving her to grapple with the implications of her relationship with Mr. Albert. Was their bond purely one of love, or was it complicated by this unexpected connection? Mr. Albert, too, was shaken, but his feelings for Ememe remained unchanged. He saw her not as the daughter of his former business partner, but as the woman he loved. Together, they faced the challenges that came with this revelation, seeking legal advice to ensure their relationship was above reproach. But just as they thought they had overcome the worst, the investigator uncovered something even more disturbing. Delving deeper into the past, he discovered that Ememe's father hadn't died in an accident, as everyone believed. Instead, he had been murdered, and the prime suspect was none other than Mr. Albert himself. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Mr. Albert, who had always maintained a veneer of respectability, was now being implicated in a crime that had remained unsolved for decades. Ememe was horrified. Could the man she loved, the man who had shown her nothing but kindness, really be a killer? Desperate to uncover the truth, Ememe confronted Mr. Albert. He was devastated by the accusation but understood why she needed answers. With a heavy heart, Mr. Albert told her what had really happened. Years ago, Ememe's father and Mr. Albert had been close friends and business partners. But as their business grew, so did tensions between them. There were disagreements over money, investments, and the direction of the company. On the night of his death, Ememe's father and Mr. Albert had a heated argument, one that ended with Ememe's father storming out in anger. Hours later, he was found dead in a car crash that was initially ruled an accident. But Mr. Albert admitted that he had always suspected foul play. He had enemies in the business world, people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. He had tried to investigate on his own, but the trail had gone cold, and eventually, he had buried the incident in the past, too grief-stricken to continue. The investigators' findings reignited old wounds. Determined to clear his name and uncover the truth, Mr. Albert hired a team of detectives to reopen the case. The investigation led them down a dark path of corruption, betrayal, and long-hidden secrets. It turned out that Ememe's father had been targeted by a rival businessman who saw him as a threat. This man had orchestrated the crash, making it look like an accident, and then pinned the blame on Mr. Albert to remove him as a competitor. With this new evidence, Mr. Albert was cleared of any wrongdoing. The real killer was brought to justice, and the truth about Ememe's father's death was finally revealed. Ememe, though shaken by the revelations, was relieved that Mr. Albert had been vindicated. Their relationship, though tested by this shocking twist, emerged stronger than ever. They decided to move forward together, more determined than ever to live a life of honesty and love. Caris, realizing the depth of his father's love for Ememe and the trials they had overcome, finally came to accept their relationship. He reconciled with his father, putting the past behind them. On the day of the wedding, Ememe's aunt, who had initially been a source of conflict, showed up unexpectedly. With tears in her eyes, she apologized for her past actions and gave her blessing to the union, acknowledging the love and happiness that Ememe had found. Surrounded by friends and family, Mr. Albert and Ememe exchanged vows, their love shining brightly in the face of all the challenges they had overcome. They spent their honeymoon traveling the world, celebrating not just their marriage but the strength of their bond. Years passed, and their love continued to grow. Together, Mr. Albert and Ememe established a charitable foundation to help young women in need, drawing from Ememe's own experiences to guide their work. Their efforts touched countless lives, proving that love, kindness, and resilience could change the world. One evening, as they watched the sunset from their home, Mr. Albert turned to Ememe, his heart full. "You're the fruit that ripened my life," he said softly. Ememe smiled, her love for him shining in her eyes. "And you're the sunshine that made my heart bloom." And so, they lived happily ever after, a testament to the power of love, acceptance, and the courage to follow one's heart, no matter the twists and turns along the way. Thank you for watching. Please support this channel, subscribe, like and share.